Hello, friends, and welcome to the Pregnancy Loss Podcast. I'm Valen. I will be your host every Tuesday. I am a postpartum and bereavement doula, mom of four, lost mom, lover of Pilates, watermelon, crystal healing, and most of all, matte pink lipstick. I literally can't get enough. This podcast is to create awareness of all the realities that come during and after pregnancy loss. Not only will we talk about the pregnancy loss part, but also life and motherhood after. This is something that I see rarely discussed. My hope is that you leave this podcast feeling just a bit lighter, but also educated, supported, and really seen. This podcast is not only for parents of loss, but also the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, the family, the friends that it has affected. If you have a topic you'd love to see discussed, leave me a comment on the episode you're listening to, and I'll respond personally. Let's jump in. Hey mamas, so happy you're here today. We get to hang out and talk. Today's episode, I decided to kind of talk about marriage and how it's affected by pregnancy loss, things like miscarriage and stillbirth. And remember when I say like pregnancy loss and I always just say miscarriage and stillbirth, I am not ignoring the other types of pregnancies like chemical pregnancies, ectopic pregnancies, having a blighted ovum, a molar pregnancy, having an incompetent cervix, termination for medical reasons. Like, I know you're all out there, and this is for all of you. Going through that list every time is kind of a long thing. And I know a lot of pregnancy losses, time frame wise, can be grouped under miscarriage or stillbirth. But you're not any less important. I just want you to know, I just don't go over the entire list all the time, okay? And that's why, too, I kind of just use the term pregnancy loss instead of going through the separate kinds. But anyways, so if you've had miscarriage, stillbirth, gone through any type of pregnancy loss, and you're married or have a significant other, you know just how difficult this is. There is no really easy way to talk about it. You can either grow from it, become stronger together, or it can sometimes tear you apart. It can cause divorces and breaking up and things like that if it's not handled, or you're not communicating, or it's just one of those things where you just can't deal with it together anymore. And there's no judgment here about any which way, whatever happened to you. I love you all very much, and I want you to know that I'm here for you. And it's just part of the life that we've been handed, I guess. If you know me, you know I'm not religious. I am spiritual. I don't believe that our babies were taken from us for any great purpose. But I know that a lot of people find comfort in that, and that is okay, and it's beautiful, and I love it. I just always like to be transparent about where I'm coming from, so that you can take the advice that feels really helpful and use it with your religion or whatever it is that you believe, right? From me and Jonathan's my husband. We have been married this year, June, it'll be 10 years, together 11. And we honestly, before Evelyn died, didn't experience any type of grief together. My dog Bonnie died Thanksgiving of 2018, which was severely devastating and traumatic for me. John tries to distance himself from animals because it's painful and he doesn't like to deal with that. But he loved her very much, but it was different for me. And so we never grieved together before, right? We didn't experience any significant family deaths or dealing with pregnancy loss, things like that. And that is a blessing and a curse all at once, because grief, it really, you learn more about the person that you're with. And for us, I remember feeling a lot of resentment and confusion because it seemed like it was easy for him. It seemed, and remember, these are all assumptions and things that I was assuming without asking or communicating. And so I just assumed and felt that this was easy for him, and he wasn't, he didn't carry her, so it didn't affect him as much, or he didn't get to like hold her and stuff, which breaks my heart and fucking kills me. But he didn't get to see her or hold her because he was overseas, and we got him home 5 days later. But um, she had already been cremated, and I didn't know there was any other choice to hold off and wait and all that stuff, because I've never experienced this before. And I know that still kills him to this day. But I just felt everything was easier for him, and I was so mad about it, and I was so resentful. And um, what I've learned about myself through therapy and stuff after Evelyn died is that I am just an avoider, and I avoid absolutely everything I can. Everything that I feel and experience, I have conversations in my head and avoid having the talk to anybody else in real life. Um, and that's really damaging for me and for him. And so I'm just trying to like stuff down all my feelings and emotions, and I'm crying and things like that, but I'm not really talking about it. And then he was just like stoic and quiet. He didn't talk to me much even, and that really hurt. And because I couldn't understand why he was being so weird to me. um, there was another part to this, a significant part of something that had happened, but I am not really ready to talk about it yet, but eventually I will be. Um, there's a lot that can go on after loss, and people find different ways to cope, and it's not always the best or healthiest way, and it can really hurt your relationships. So, my hope in always talking about this stuff is to normalize it and let you guys know that you're not alone. And literally, there's somebody always going through this, and I want to be the person who helps as much as I can. So yeah, so I was reading articles online, and there was a statistic that I came across that was talked about people who are married and have a miscarriage are 22% more likely to break up. And then even higher with stillbirth, it was people who are married or have a significant other and have had a stillbirth are 40% more likely to break up. And the thing about statistics is, just because it's there doesn't mean you'll be part of that. Um, you don't have to break up, okay? Um, you're gonna have to work at it, especially if you grieve differently, which most people do, and you're not very good communicating and things like that. But I just wanted to kind of look up statistic rates on that, because it can go either way. You can grow apart or you can grow together. And so, like, um, some people isolate themselves. They isolate themselves. They want to grieve on their own. They want to be left alone. Some people look for distractions, anything to keep their mind busy and off of it. And other people get stuck in this what if scenario loop. What if I did this? What if this happened? What if this? What if I could have done this? Should I have done this? Like, there are different ways that people handle things. And I think a natural part of the grief of losing a child, losing a pregnancy, is that we're going to all be in denial at some point. I remember when I was laying there with Evelyn in the hospital bed, I kept begging and pleading for God to bring her back to life. And I knew, even when I was begging and pleading, that it was impossible. And that's not how life works, and that's not how things work. But I could not come to terms with the fact that this little baby that I was holding in my arms was dead and gone and would never come back. Especially when you're like, miracles happen every day. Like, give me a fucking miracle. Bring my fucking baby back to life. Maybe she's just got some fluid in there and just needs to come out. Like, it's okay, because that's what saves us in those moments. And a cool thing about our brains when we're experiencing something traumatic is that our brains do not allow us to feel everything at once. I tell you what, it is a saving grace. And that's why sometimes, too, you can't remember everything. And you can't remember how something happened. You just know that it did happen. Because your brain has to allow these things to come in at different times. Because otherwise, that fucking pain will kill you. The death of her on that day, I could have just died if I had to feel all of the grief and everything at one time. So I am so grateful to have our brains that are always trying to protect us and keep us alive, because there are things like this where we need it. And let's see, there's and there was what was it? There was another statistic that women felt more disconnected from their spouse after miscarriage or stillbirth than typically men do. And I think that has to do with a lot of things, a lot of disconnect in how we're grieving differently, and all the common fears, like after you after you lose a baby and you have all these terrible thoughts and things, like I shared in the last episode, like, if I'm not thinking about my baby every minute of every day, I'm a terrible human and a terrible mother. Like, this is my fault. I caused this. Just these fears and thoughts that our grief puts into us. And when we feel disconnected from our partners, we do isolate and we do avoid any type of communication, because, I mean, for me, I felt a lot of resentment. It's like, why the hell is this so easy for you? I don't get it. And of course, it was not easy for him. It's still not easy for him. And so at that point, it's the one thing that is going to save your relationship, to me, is communicating. And the only way me and John got through to that point was going to therapy together. We went to marriage therapy for quite a long time, for about 7 or 8 months. And if we wouldn't have done that, we would not be together. Because I learned that I'm an avoider and I'm a terrible communicator. And I think I say things out loud, but really I'm just having conversations in my head and thinking like, oh, I did say that, and I really didn't. And we learned how to communicate after Evelyn died. We had to learn to give each other space when we needed it, when we were angry or having big emotions, but also be able to be there to offer support when it was needed and wanted. We learned to always be there for each other, and we were able to grow stronger together. And I am so grateful for that. Something else too that can like pull you apart is when you see each other grieve differently. Like I was kind of saying, like, I assumed all these things about John and his grief and the way he was grieving without giving him the opportunity to tell me how he was actually feeling. And so I was drifting apart from him because I was assuming all these things and just thinking I knew what he was going through and how he was grieving, which was totally shitty of me. And if I wouldn't have gone to therapy, because we went to marriage therapy and then we also went separately to different therapists to work on our own stuff, because pregnancy loss also brings up so much inside you and how you grew up and the beliefs that you have. And sometimes you don't see that shit until you hit a trauma that knocks you on your ass. And so that was just crazy. So just remember, assuming things about your partner or significant other when they're grieving, it kills your relationship. And a big part about that is that we are going to cope differently. Some people cope better than others. And just because they're coping better, it doesn't mean that they're okay. And it doesn't mean that they're over it. And I think that's something to remember on our part. And, whoever's listening to this, we got to give the space for them to communicate with us too. I think that's super important. And we also had to find stuff that we like doing together after Evelyn died, because this was his second deployment, 7-month deployment. But if you know anything about the military, the year prior to the deployment, you have a year workup where John counted. It was like he was gone 282 days the year before they go on a 7-month deployment. So our marriage wasn't good even before Evelyn died. And obviously it was not good when she died. And it only got better when we made the choice to go to therapy and decided that we wanted to be together. And it was important. So sometimes you got to talk to each other. And that's what's going to make all the difference in the world. If you have any questions or comments, I love to hear them. Leave them on the episode. You can always email me too. And I leave all my information on the podcast notes, the work. Oh my God, I can't even talk right now. Anyway, I hope you guys have a beautiful week. If there's anything that I missed or that you think is really important to add, I would love to hear about it, because I'm still learning, and I'm always learning about how other people have gone through this. So, email me. My email is info.valenweb@gmail.com. And I look forward to hearing from you. Have a great week, and I will see you guys. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Pregnancy Loss Podcast. I hope you feel just a little bit lighter knowing you are not alone. Don't forget to share this episode or podcast with another person who may need the message. It is so helpful for me to help others find me. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Pregnancy Loss Podcast. Have a great week. Bye.